Number 10. Undead Brother Voodoo. This version of Brother Voodoo hails from Earth 666, ooh spooky, where he is part of the Undead Avengers team. While still technically a hero, he's also still technically a monster. The Avengers of Earth 666 are all considered members of the Undead, with each of them technically being some kind of monster, some version of Undead, if you will. Jericho Drum in this universe appears to be some kind of poltergeist-like ghost from his appearance here. I don't know if he's specifically a poltergeist, I just think of him that way because of his glowiness. I don't know, reminds me of the movie Poltergeist. This team, including the ghostly Brother Voodoo, make their first appearance in issue number 33 of the Secret Avengers series, where they tangle with Secret Avengers members Captain Britain and Clint Barton's Hawkeye of Earth 616.
Number 9. Groot. Before he was the mainstay lovable space ent in Guardians of the Galaxy with a raccoon-shaped compatriot, Groot was actually an evil, monstrous tree. He first appeared in Tales to Astonish number 13 in 1960. The tagline in the comic itself was, quote, "Where Groot walks, death follows." He was also entirely obscure before being thrust into the pop culture fandom when Marvel decided to turn their C-list team, Guardians of the Galaxy, into a phenomenally massive success. He was originally a throwaway monster, and his original comic, before 2012, was worth $2,868, which isn't small by any means, but after the movies premiered, it was worth $19,000. In the comic, Groot belongs to a species called Floral Colossus, although they're also just called Groots too. During his early life, the Floral Colossi rule over Planet X, and Groot was an outcast amongst his people. He became friends with the inferior species called the Undergrowth, a fungi-like species also on the planet. Groot is eventually forced to flee his homeworld after he kills another Colossus while defending an Undergrowth. Before the movies, Groot also appeared in 2 other comics, one being The Incredible Hulk, where he more so resembles his original appearance rather than the huggable tree we know today. The Hulk comic released in 1976, and then lastly he was in Annihilation Conquest number 6 in 2008. It was the first appearance of Groot as his modern rendition, smaller, skinnier, a bit more approachable than the Godzilla-style tree we knew before. He also joined the Guardians of the Galaxy lineup in this comic alongside Star-Lord, Drax the Destroyer, and Rocket Raccoon.
Number 8. Rune King Thor. Thor is an incredibly powerful character who has been around forever, as I'm sure everyone knows. But after Odin passed away, Thor became the king of Asgard, and he sucked. He did a lot of unking-like things. But to fix all that, he uses time travel to go back and just reverse it all. But now Loki has orchestrated a whole thing, resurrecting Surtur and Ragnarok, creating new hammers and attacking Asgard, ending the lives of many significant Asgardians and just being a real pain in the bum. Thor is visited by the personification of the Odin Force in the form of a little kid who tells Thor he needs to gain wisdom. So to do that, Thor follows after his late father and goes to the Well of Mimir, sacrificing both of his eyes and drinking from the well in order to gain the knowledge that Ragnarok is an endless cycle. He then goes to Yggdrasil, the World Tree, and hangs himself there until he actually passes away. Doing this imbues him with rune magic, which gives him knowledge of the future and the past and the ability to control the present. And he's saved by Odin's spirit before his soul can be claimed by Hela. He returns to Earth with both the Odin Force and this new rune magic. Using these forces, he is able to erase the man god from existence with a single touch. That's one of the most powerful beings in the multiverse that even Odin was afraid of. He defeats all the forces of Loki, including Loki himself. He recreates his hammer and uses it to literally destroy reality with a single swing.
Number 7. Marvel Zombies. It's an entire pantheon of characters, from Spider-Man to Hulk to Captain America, but all zombified. The zombie versions of beloved heroes were first introduced in the pages of Ultimate Fantastic Four and became instant hits. In typical Marvel marketing genius, Marvel spun the zombies into their own book written by none other than Robert Kirkman. Robert Kirkman is the same bearded guy behind a television show you might know called The Walking Dead. The comics ran from December 2005 to April 2006. It starts in an alternate Earth called Earth 2149, where an unknown hero crash lands from another dimension. He comes with a, quote, hunger, which infects the Avengers, the X-Men, and the Fantastic Four, along with basically every other major superhero you can think of. It's intense, and the adventures of the zombie heroes usually have more mayhem than most mainstream comics do in their entire run. It's all about damage and impact, and oh boy does Kirkman deliver on that. Peter Parker eats Aunt May. I'm serious, look it up. After an episode of the Disney Plus series called What If Zombies, there were talks of Disney also creating a spin-off series based on and named after the Marvel zombies, so keep an eye out.
Number 6. The Yeti. This Yeti is relegated to another universe because of the series it appears in, which was intended to be, good for young readers and children, and which was said to exist outside of the main continuity. This Yeti we are talking about here appears in Spidey Super Stories in issue 16. Oh boy. In this team-up book, we see Spider-Man go on adventures that are more kid-friendly when it comes to reading, ideally therefore serving the purpose of helping kids learn how to read, which is important. The Yeti hails from Earth 57780, and while he might seem like a monster by the end of the story, Spider-Man, also of Earth 57780, seems to have ascertained that the Yeti really is not a bad guy, but is just homesick. He's just stealing a lot of ice cream. So he attempts to help the Yeti by getting him safely home so he can be cold again. Yay.
Number 5. Morbius, the living vampire. It's Morbius' world and we're just living in it. He first appeared in Amazing Spider-Man number 101 in 1971. The story goes, in a desperate attempt to save his own life as he suffers from a rare blood disease, Dr. Mike Morbius turns to a cure that uses vampire bat DNA because of course he does. It mutates him into a half-vampire, half-human monster. It's Morbiclock out there, and Morbius was actually initially kind of a bad guy. He fought Spider-Man and Blade before becoming a vigilante justice sort of anti-hero who struggles with the insatiable lust for blood. He's also desperate to find the cure to his vampirism. Honestly, in the comics, Morbius looks way scarier and monstrous than the Laughingstock movie. I think it's one of those things where the cartoon and artistic medium is much better at portraying the monster than Jared Leto is.
Number 4. Mcu Gargantos. Gargantos is one of the monsters from Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness that I thought, might be one of the big bads of that movie. Instead, I was wrong, and the beast was used simply as a distraction. Seemingly modeled after the comic book character Mcu Gargantos, Disney and Marvel decided against using the name of that character for copyright reasons, and so instead decided to use a name that solely belonged to them. Enter Gargantos. Although in the comics, Gargantos is less of a magical monster and instead is kinda like your typical multi-tentacled, one-eyed sea monster. In the film, it takes the combined efforts of Sorcerer Supreme Wong and Dr. Stephen Strange to defeat the beast, and Strange even pulls out some magical monster tricks of his own to stop Gargantos. While Gargantos appears in a multiversal film, him being based off of Mcu Gargantos would likely also make him a multiversal monster just straight up.
Number 3. Ghost Rider. Who could forget Johnny Blaze, one of the Ghost Riders set out to hunt down earthly baddies and drag them kicking and screaming to hell where they belong. The legacy of the Ghost Rider began in the pre-Marvel age with a ghostly cowboy who hunted the prairie of the American frontier. But the modern version is a stunt biker, Johnny Blaze, who becomes possessed by the demon Zarathos and becomes a flame-headed skeleton with a cool bike and fancy leather jacket, hunting down bad guys in the name of vengeance. At times, he's the bad guy himself, being the not polished hero that has no problem taking lives. At others, he fights with the other Marvel heroes to take down bigger foes. I mean, he looks badass, can we be honest here, and he's definitely one of my favorite Marvel monsters.
Number 2. What if Conan the Barbarian were stranded in the 20th century? And if you thought Wolverine and Conan fighting was weird, it just gets a whole lot weirder with this issue. However, I guess I should say that it gets a whole lot less weird, as the previous Conan What If we talked about was actually from the second volume of the series, as opposed to this issue that we're talking about, which is actually from the original series. In issue 43 of What If, we learn what would happen if Conan, instead of just coming to the modern day, was stranded there and stuck there. This What If was actually inspired by another fan favorite What If featured in issue 13. What if Conan the Barbarian walked the earth today? In this story, because Conan never gets teleported by lightning home, he becomes a criminal. Because why not, I guess? He's confused, he doesn't know what he's doing. However, after creating a gang and getting into some trouble, he attracts the attention of the Avengers. But Captain America sees more than just a brute, and believes Conan is just misguided, but he has a hero's heart, truly. He offers him a spot on the Avengers, and we actually never learn what Conan decides because the issue ends. Talk about a cliffhanger. I don't know if we'll ever come back. Do we ever come back to that? It's like, will I call him? Won't I call him? And then the Watcher's like, well, I would tell you, but I can't because that's a story for another time. Maybe if we ever do it.
Number 1. Mcu Gargantos. Quote, "Before all was, I was." Before time was, I waited. I fed on the screaming souls of the universe. I drank the spoiled milk of dead stars. I am the emptiness outside all understanding. I am Mcu Gargantos. Is a pretty sweet way to introduce yourself. His character design is next to none as one of the great old ones who first appeared in a 1972 comic called Journey into Mystery Volume 2. This tentacle monster more so looks like a freak of nature than a typical monster. He's the ruler of hundreds of dimensions and comes to the Earth realm millions of years ago along with the other old ones. Around 1 million BC, he was banished from Earth by a time traveler sorcerer named Sea-Sneg. It was witnessed by Doctor Strange, who hoped to defeat the Ancient One so his master didn't have to die, but obviously it never really works out like that. But then Mcu Gargantos reappears and becomes the main foe of Doctor Strange. While we can get into his whole villain arc with Doctor Strange, I would prefer to look at the other reality he appeared in with Earth 30847. He became an unlikely savior of Earth, and upon accepting that they thought of him as a hero, he ended up hosting a Japanese game show called the Super Monster Awesome Hour, which honestly, vibes.
Professor X as Juggernaut. In What If number 13, the question is posed, what if Professor X had become the Juggernaut? And the answer is, it would make Ben Ball feel uncomfortable. This mashup is maybe a little tough to justify for this list since it's about superheroes, and in this story Professor X, or not, does enlist all of the mutants to take over the world, but it's still Professor X in there somewhere, and it's arguable that he may have been turned from good to evil by the influence of the Sidorak gem. I just had to put this strange character on the list because I think it's such a weird combination to even consider, let alone craft a whole issue around. Look at him. Chonky, fully mobile Professor X. When he puts the helmet on, things are less weird though, but it's still one for the list.
Number 9. Wolverwimp. Wolverwimp is an alternate version of Wolverine who, instead of having an adamantium skeleton, has a styrofoam one. He appears in one of the joke covers included in issue 100 of What If. This poor version of Wolverine is threatened by a little girl who is a female child version of Magneto. Yeah, it's weird. While Wolverine is fearsome and tends to fight for what he believes in no matter the odds, it seems that Wolverwimp is all too ready to shy away from a fight as he's terrified of a conflict. Honestly, I really can't blame the poor guy. He is a styrofoam skeleton, so yeah. I don't even know how you'd walk around with that, never mind trying to be a hero and stand up to bad guys. Probably just crumple over.
Frog Thor, or Throg. There's not much more to it than that. The question posed in this issue is, what if the X-Men had stayed in Asgard? It really has nothing to do with Frog Thor, but he makes an epic appearance nonetheless. The transformation actually takes place in Thor number 363 and is revisited in this What If issue. If you don't already know, or couldn't already have guessed, Thor's slimy amphibian form comes at the hands of his brother Loki. What makes this moment great in What If number 12 though is that Storm is forced to face off against Frog Thor, with the stakes being the prosperity of all of Asgard. Luckily, she wins the fight and Frog Thor is turned back into regular Thor. Although, is that really a win? I liked Frog Thor. If you want to see more of Throg, you can catch him in another storyline as well, where a shard of Thor's hammer is actually picked up by a frog, turning it into a pretty powerful little dude. I just thought that was worth mentioning as well. Frog Thor.
Number 7. What if Professor X had become the Juggernaut? In this reality, Professor X is the one who becomes Juggernaut and gets buried. Now this causes him to go down a completely different path when it comes down to the X-Men, because after this, he never ended up creating the X-Men because he was stuck. So now the Fantastic Four wants to defeat Magneto instead. So Professor X, he's still listening. He's using his mind powers. He's knowing what's going on out there. He's kind of getting pissed that he's not able to go out and help. So he digs his way out, and his telepathy powers are now stronger than ever with his new Juggernaut super strength. So he takes over the country with his own X-Men posse to enforce these anti-human laws. So Cyclops even sided with Magneto at this point because he could block Xavier's telepathy. So they're battling it out on Asteroid M, and Cyclops is trying to remind Xavier about his original dream, with humans and mutants living together in harmony. And before he could really consider it, the ground beneath him exploded and he got launched into space, probably forever, and man, that's gotta be boring. Imagine not dying in space. That sounds like an absolute nightmare. This should be number 1 maybe, I don't know.
Thanos Captain America. In What If Infinity Thanos, the question is posed, what if Thanos joined the Avengers? And the result is this really strange depiction of Thanos wearing a Captain America suit. What goes on in this storyline is that Thanos joins up with the Avengers to fight the Builders, and he doesn't even try to take over the world or try and kill half the population or anything like that. That is until Captain America is killed and Thanos takes over for him. Because then he decides it's time to start taking over stuff again. After he helps the Avengers destroy the Builders with a swift battle, he goes back to his classic Thanos self and makes it his duty to take on Cap's old position as leader. And then quickly makes it his duty as well to lead the Avengers and the rest of the heroes of Earth into war with the rest of the universe. So yeah, he doesn't take over Earth, but he seems to be ready to help them take over other worlds alongside him. Fair compromise? I guess so. Either way, the cover of this issue just feels so weird, and I felt that Captain America Thanos needed to make an appearance on this list.
Number 5. What if the Avengers had never been? Now, with all of these multiverse stories beginning in the MCU, it feels like the Avengers have never been further apart. It's exciting, but also a little concerning. This What If was actually the first What If issue with a major death, just 3 issues in. They're going for it. So we start off with the Hulk, and instead of smashing and hitting, he's dashing and quitting. He wants nothing to do with the team. So Rick Jones is sent to look for the Green Goliath, but he ends up being held hostage, where Tony Stark has to now come to the rescue. Now they make it back to the mansion, but Namor and Hulk want more. They challenge Earth's mightiest to the fight for their lives. Now Iron Man makes suits for Hank, Jan, and Rick, but they can't control the suits. It's too much for them, so they stay in retirement. So Stark powers up his own suit to the max, and then some more, so it's a lot of power going on, almost unobtainable. But then when the rest of the team finally do show up to the battle in Stark's other suits, Hank takes a hard hit. So Tony has to then transfer his suit's energy, that fat energy, in order to keep Hank alive. So even in this What If, Tony still throws his life down for others. How sweet.
You! Yes, you. In this issue of What If, the question is posed, what if you were Spider-Man? They start with a panel of Spider-Man swinging Mary Jane to safety, and they even encourage you to paste a picture of your own face over Spider-Man's to make it even more immersive. But moving forward, this issue doesn't really take much time to explore that question before absolutely roasting you beyond words. The very next panel shows a big group of all of Spider-Man's villains standing in a graveyard, pointing and laughing at a gravestone that reads, "Here lies, fill in your name here," and in big bold letters says, "You'd be dead, you're no superhero." So mean, but also very funny. I thought this was a great one to include because as much as Marvel is known for their meta commentary, this is just on a whole different level.
Number 3. What if the Punisher killed Daredevil? We all know the Punisher as the guy who usually brutally kills criminals. See, with superheroes, those guys he likes to hit with a tranquilizer. But in this What If, we see Daredevil get hit with one of those tranq darts and fall off a building. So while Kingpin prepared for his next step now that he's out of the way, Spider-Man stepped in to deliver some justice on Frank Castle. So he finds the Punisher, and Punisher has no tranq darts left. So he shoots Spider-Man in the shoulder. It's messy, but not fatal, he says. He should survive unless he exerts himself, which he does. And his identity is then revealed. Then it cuts to Aunt May's house, and she grabs a paper, reads the shocking headline, and then the house explodes from a missile launched from the Silvermane City. Boom, house gone. And then after a little while, Peter shows up in a hospital gown, ready to get some revenge on Frank. Peter does pretty well in the fight, so well he's actually just moments away from throwing the Punisher off of a building to his death. But the Punisher stalls and says he has info about his Aunt May, and this slows Peter down for just a split second, allowing for the Punisher to unload on Peter. God, imagine if they introduced Frank Castle in the MCU and then they immediately did something like this.
Stan Lee and the original Marvel Bullpen as the Fantastic Four. Naturally, this issue poses the question, what if the original Marvel Bullpen had become the Fantastic Four? And what we see is a version of Mr. Fantastic with the likeness of Stan Lee, which is just so fun and bizarre. Jack Kirby, Flo Steinberg, and Saul Brodsky also appear as the other three, and they have themselves a fun, very original adventure as the popular titular heroes. Unfortunately, this issue apparently has some pretty sexist overtones, mostly aimed at Steinberg, which makes the Marvel creators come off as sort of unlikable, especially by today's standards. But regardless, it's a lot of fun to see the people behind the scenes of many of our favorite comics in the forefront of this unique issue of What If.
Number 1, Sheep Boy. When it comes to characters that really stick out to me in the world of Marvel What If, I gotta say a lot of them come from the funny little bits of the comics that aren't even full issues. Because come on, they're so wonderfully ridiculous. One such example at one such point, I guess, is the notorious Sheep Boy. Sheep Boy made his first appearance in What If issue 100. He was created by Jim Chung and is the reimagined version of Spider-Man. Basically, what if Peter Parker had been bit by a radioactive sheep instead? What would we get? Sheep Boy, which would really make for an interesting clone saga when it comes to figuring out the cloning process. Because, aren't we like all about sheeps when it comes to cloning? Actually, I think that through cloning sheep we actually learned that cloning humans would be ill-advised. So maybe there'd be no more clones in the Marvel Universe if it started with sheep. No more clone sagas after that. I don't know if that would be good or bad. Depends on how much you like or dislike clones, I guess.
Number 10. Hyperion. Hyperion is basically Marvel's first ever answer to DC's Superman. There are a few different versions of Hyperion from across the Marvel comics, but as a brief summary, originally he was from Earth 712. He was the last surviving member of the Eternals, and he comes to Earth and is raised by a family called the Miltons. He takes the name Marcus Milton. Eventually, he moves to Cosmopolis, becomes a newspaper cartoonist, and joins the Squadron Supreme. Yes, he is basically Superman. There's a story where he does battle with an evil clone version of himself created by the Grand Master. There is also a King Hyperion who basically destroys all the most powerful beings in the universe and takes over the Earth. That's obviously a villain, but it just shows how astronomically powerful this hero can be. The version of Hyperion who has most recently shown up is the Hyperion from Earth 13034. His Earth was destroyed by an incursion and he's pulled to 616. But what are his powers? Well, he is strong enough to hold two colliding universes apart for a short period of time, so there's that. He has super speed, durability, and stamina. He can fly, he has X-ray vision, heat vision, super intellect. I promise this isn't a list of Superman's powers. Number 9. Cosmic Iron Man. Tony Stark as a god with his great sense of humor should be fantastic, but it's honestly a little scary. After Iron Man is imbued with the power cosmic, he becomes the Iron God. And one of the first things he does is do battle with the also power cosmic powered Korvac. These two are literally throwing moons and planets at each other during their fight. That is until Iron God transports Korvac to a destroyed universe and fights him until the cosmic entities show up and take Korvac away, leaving Tony to see what he does next. Iron God's goal is to make the world into a paradise, to fix all of its problems. He knows that his past attempts to do this haven't gone too well and that the other heroes will likely try to stop him. But he can use the power cosmic to do whatever he wants, and since all of his ideas for helping the world were trapped in his mind, he shares his intellect and ideas with the entire population of New York, just to start. This plays out in some interesting ways. A couple stops arguing and begins thinking logically, for one. A kid at a baseball game starts talking about background radiation, and the villain Big Wheel decides to solve traffic issues using quantum mechanics. The only problem is that Tony isn't exactly the kind of guy to fully think things through or consult with others before he does things, and that also transferred to other people.
Number 8. Ultimate Hulk. Let's be real, when I think of multiversal monster versions of the Hulk, I often think of Ultimate Hulk of Earth 1610, aka the Ultimate Universe. Here, Hulk was less a hero and more just, kind of a brute. In fact, at one point, the Ultimates, who are basically this Earth's version of the Avengers, even had to fight against, not with the Hulk. The Hulk would eventually go on to join the Ultimates team, I'll give him that, but let's not forget that he's a cannibalistic beast who also makes some of the most violent threats when he's angry. Even Bruce Banner wasn't as altruistic in this universe, initially hoping to create the next super soldier serum so that he might be able to increase his own strength and power. However, instead he created a Hulk serum, which turned him into the Hulk because he was all about testing that serum on himself. It's even implied that during his first transformation that he may have actually caused the death of Mary and Richard Parker, the parents of Spider-Man. Peter Parker, so yeah.
Number 7. Hercules during Chaos War. Hercules is an incredibly powerful Olympian who is on par with, if not stronger than, Thor. But one of his most powerful moments was during the events of Chaos War when the Chaos King attacked. Amadeus Cho becomes a god, but he's mortal and cannot handle it, so he transfers the power to Hercules. Now with this power, Hercules leads a team against the Chaos King. He's able to fly, teleport, and release energy from his hands and eyes. His strength was amped up to incredible levels. His footsteps created shockwaves, and he was even able to come out on top in a confrontation with the Council of Godheads, which is basically a group made up of the chief deities of all the different pantheons. He could summon Galactus and Eternity against their will, and defeated a Chaos King Zeus, who just defeated Galactus with a single punch. He could give others power too, giving all the heroes the power of flight. He could grow to the size of a planet to fight the Chaos King with his fists, eventually defeating him. But to close out the story, Hercules uses his power to undo all the crazy stuff that the Chaos King did, and he became mortal again. But damn, he was powerful. Number 6. Rachel Summers. Rachel here is from the Days of Future Past storyline, and she is another of the mutant children of Jean Grey and Scott Summers. She has access to the Phoenix Force and was raised in the Xavier Institute and becomes the partner of the future version of Franklin Richards. After she was kidnapped by soldiers who had taken out everyone else in her house, Rachel became a mutant hound, using her psionic powers to hunt down other mutants for the authorities. They branded her face with an irremovable pattern of tattoos to mark her as a hound and forced her to wear a leash. Rachel took out mutants, some of which were people she loved. Rachel's grief and shame from what she did as a hound and the deaths of her parents and friends made her a pretty dark character, even after she broke her brainwashing. She's one of the most powerful psychics in the entire Marvel universe, and that's the case before she became the one true Phoenix and had its cosmic powers. As Phoenix, Rachel's abilities are enhanced to their ultimate levels, limited only by her force of will and her imagination. She literally becomes the cosmic entity, the Phoenix. Number 5. Franklin Richards. When Reed Richards and Sue Storm had a child together, a whole bunch of cosmic tomfoolery went on, resulting in Franklin Richards, the baby, being born with powers to alter matter on a universal scale. So in other words, he can basically manipulate reality on a cosmic level, which is an insane amount of power for a kid to wield. He's put mental blocks on himself to help control this power, but that doesn't mean he can't still do a hell of a lot. Some of the things this guy has done include: when all the mutants were destroyed by Onslaught, Franklin resurrected them all and put them in a universe that he just created. When Abraxas killed all the versions of Galactus, Franklin resurrected him. He's also resurrected Galactus and literally made him his herald. Recently, it was revealed that instead of being a mutant, Franklin actually altered every cell within his own body to appear like he had the X gene to fit in a bit more with the mutants. There is even a fan theory that Franklin Richards controls the Marvel Multiverse to stop characters from aging throughout the many years they have been around, and it's honestly possible. Number 4. Doctor Strange. When looking at the rest of the characters on this list, it's kind of hard to see why the heck Doctor Strange is showing up here. And that's fair. Looking at his abilities in the MCU, and even the comics past the point of 2009, he's not that strong. But before that time, Doctor Strange was an incredibly powerful character. So powerful that Marvel needed to depower him. He could easily defeat pretty much any foe before this time. So basically, Doctor Strange's only real power is his ability to use magic and magical artifacts. But since he was so good at that, he could basically do anything he wanted to. Flight, time travel, telepathy, shields, astral projection, teleportation, all of these using spells and artifacts. He has survived being close to a star and has caused that star to collapse into a black hole. He has summoned cosmic entities and imprisoned and defeated the In-Betweener. He's altered the fabric of the universe. He's trapped the Beyonder and undone the things the Beyonder had done when he warped reality. He's broken out of a spell cast by the Living Tribunal, and he has even become Death. He's defeated Dormammu, Nightmare, and Shumagorath on a regular basis. It may be surprising that he's on this list, but it shouldn't be.
Number 3. Runes. Runes is just the most messed up kind of weird that a multiversal story can be. This comic offers a much darker take on what the world could be like with superpowers. Of course, it is a story by Garth Ennis, so yes, darker is definitely where we're going here. As brutal as Runes is, well, I kind of love how dark and awful it gets. The series deals with the less fantastical, more literal interpretations of powers and their uses, and how less hopeful civilians and government agencies might react or take advantage of said superpowers. In this world, Quicksilver is just a torso with his limbs moving too fast, causing him problems, so they all had to be amputated. At least that's what's implied. Or they just didn't like that he went fast, so they amputated them. The Hulk is an irradiated pile of tumors, which ultimately dies under the weight of his own mutation, and the Silver Surfer ends up driven mad by his own cosmic existence, taking his own life by clawing his own chest open while floating through space. This is a bleak and disturbing world filled with pain and suffering. Not heroes in capes. That's part of what makes it great, and part of what makes it weird, and part of what makes it horrifying.
Number 2. Adam Warlock. First appearing in 1967 in Fantastic Four number 66, Adam Warlock was created by the Enclave, who were experimenting to create a perfect human specimen. This made him super strong, durable, fast, and he can store and use huge amounts of cosmic energy to make him fly, release blasts, and all kinds of things, including cocooning himself to help him heal and regenerate. Now every time he does this though, he actually comes out more powerful than when he went in, and he evolves new powers. He is also able to use quantum magic, which lets him teleport, make force fields, and move at the speed of light, create wormholes, resurrect himself and others, has cosmic awareness, manipulates, removes, and judges the souls of others. He has a lot of powers. He's altered the evolution of beings, he's manipulated matter, turning Thanos into stone, and then he wielded the Infinity Gauntlet. We have had Mutant Jesus, and this guy is basically Space Jesus. And one of his biggest feats is completely embarrassing the hell out of Mephisto, Marvel's most powerful demon, in his own realm. He has accidentally destroyed the entire universe, including all cosmic entities except the one above all who had to fix it all. He does have an evil persona of himself though, called Magus, but we've gone too far, so I can't wait for Disney to completely depower him to make him incredibly lame and boring in the MCU. Number 1. Cosmic Comic Spider-Man. Sometimes Marvel will make a joke character or scenario and it ends up creating a character more powerful than any other character possibly ever. In How to Read Comics the Marvel Way, issues 1-4, the comic itself becomes a character, and it starts off trying to teach the reader how exactly to read comics properly. The comic follows Spider-Man in a conflict with Mysterio, who found the Cosmic Comic, the same one speaking to us, in the basement of the Natural History Museum. It allowed Mysterio to freeze Spider-Man in time in a comic panel, turn inanimate objects to life, and increase his size. Once Spider-Man gets his spider sense back, he realizes the Cosmic Comic is influencing events, so he grabs the comic, thinking it's one of Mysterio's tricks, and tears it in half. After realizing the error of his ways, Spider-Man and Mysterio begin trying to write their own comics to use the Cosmic Comic to make their comics become reality. Thanks to the Cosmic Comic, they end up fighting across time, altering history, and Peter learns of the fact that he is a comic book character, seeing all of his comic book publication history. Taking in all this info, he fuses together with the Cosmic Comic, basically meaning he can control reality within Marvel Comics, which I think is even technically more powerful than multiversal power. He prints the comic he created, which has him saving the day and winning the battle, and it changes reality so that that's the outcome of the fight with Mysterio.
Kicking off the list at number 10, what if the Fantastic Four had not gained their superpowers? Okay, the Fantastic Four, the FF, they got their powers when they were on a space mission, and all of a sudden cosmic radiation entered the chat. Powers were given to them all at the same time, each obtaining a hint of the elements. But what if this space mission didn't go south? What if that cosmic storm didn't get past the spaceship's shielding? Well, afterwards, the rocket group, that's what they're called after, becomes the highest ranking space industry, so even without powers, they're still awesome. But when Mole Man's monsters come along to attack, the team still comes out on top because science always wins. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be so great. It helps the channel out a lot. Or if you want to hit subscribe, our faces will pop up on your feed. How lovely is that? Number 9. What if Spider-Man had rescued Gwen Stacy? Yes, okay, I remember sitting in the theater watching The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which is so underrated as a movie. Side note, it gets way too much for some reason. But when Gwen was falling in the clock tower, I held my breath. I knew what was gonna happen, and to this day, it's one of the saddest scenes in a comic book film. So this what if certainly helped ease that pain. Issue 24 shows us a world where he caught Gwen, and after that, it's beautiful. He proposes, he reveals his identity to her, and on top of that, Harry and Norman reunite. They work it out. All of the wins, look at this. And then when Peter and Gwen do get married at the ceremony, they're doing the cha-cha slide, which I personally love doing. But then J. Jonah Jameson bursts in with a bunch of police officers with footage that reveals Peter Parker as Spider-Man. So at this point, Peter was forced to run for the rest of his life to protect the ones that he loved. I had you in the first half. I know I did. These what ifs are mostly sad. Number 8. What if the Phoenix had not died? Issue 27 of What If again shows us a brighter future. Well, at least it starts that way. In this alternate reality, Jean didn't die. She was actually reborn again, and then when the X-Men have to take on Galactus and Terex in the Shi'ar Galaxy, she uses that Phoenix Force to get the job done. She puts an end to Galactus, which sounds great on paper, but the Phoenix Force starts to amplify and get a little bit more and more out of control. So she accidentally destroyed a small star and other asteroids, and when she returns to the X-Mansion, she's now in hot water for destroying yet another star. Shadowcat is not pleased, so Jean turns into the Dark Phoenix and takes out Shadowcat, and Polaris, and Cyclops, and also planet Earth, and then shortly after consumes the universe. That escalated quickly, wow.
Number 7, Joshua Guthrie and Unit Jim 211131. This is actually a pretty sad story, but one that is also kind of silly. It's basically reminiscent of the Iron Giant. Remember the Iron Giant? Remember all the tears that we cried? Except instead of any old giant robot, we have a Sentinel. Unit Jim 211131. This Sentinel is found by Josh Guthrie, little sibling to Husk and Cannonball, who never has his mutant powers manifest. In this world anyways. On our 616, Josh ends up getting wings and musical mutant abilities, going by the codename Icarus. Here, however, he just gets a Sentinel, who has broken programming and instead believes his prime directive is basically to protect and serve Josh. However, he still remembers that mutants are a threat, and when he meets Paige and Sam Guthrie, ends up battling against them, while painted up like an X-Men. Josh's idea, because he wanted to prove that he and his robot were basically a better team than the X-Men ever could be. Oh boy. Paige and Sam end up beaten by the Sentinel, but just as it's about to terminate the defeated mutants, oh no! Josh steps in to protect his siblings. He says that the Sentinel can't kill them without killing him as well. As such, the robot realizes it is the main threat to Josh and decides to terminate itself instead in order to protect him, because that's its prime directive at this point. Sure, Sentinels are kind of villains, but in this story, in a roundabout way, Unit Jim 211131 is actually kind of the hero. Although he threatens Paige and Sam and Josh, he also ends up saving them from himself. I don't know why I made the Sentinel a he, but the Sentinel's a he now, because I'm not going to go back. I gave the Sentinel a gender, I hope that's okay. Josh mourns the loss of his robo friend, and it is ultra sad. Just like Iron Giant.
Number 6. What if the Beast and the Thing continued to mutate? Volume 1, Issue 37. When the Thing is being mutated from Virus X in the normal timeline, Captain America tells him about MODOK's base, but in this tale, the Thing takes off before he gets a chance to do so. So Captain America and Giant Man raid MODOK's base on their own, then they get the antidote that Bill can now use to cure his cancer. Ben reaches this point when he's evolving, and he ends up releasing all of this cosmic energy that 1. Cured himself of Virus X, and 2. Cured Alicia's blindness. Double win. Yes. Grimm is happy with the family, and the newly cured Giant Man takes Ben's spot on the Fantastic Four. It's good. This is a good one. We got one. Nice. Number 5. What if the Avengers had never been? Written by Jim Shooter and Gil Kane, released in 1977. This was actually the first what if issue with a major death. So of course it has to be on the list somewhere. So we start off with the Hulk. Now this time he's not hitting, he's actually quitting. Now this caused the Avengers to dismantle. So Stark asked Rick Jones to find the Hulk, Thor went back to Asgard, and Jan and Hank went back to living as normal people. So Rick finds him, but he's now being held hostage from the Green Giant. So Stark swoops in and saves him, and they head back to the Avengers mansion. So Namor and the Hulk call out the Avengers, or rather what's left of them. So Iron Man makes a few iron suits for the others, and the suits, I mean, they aren't Tony Stark. They can't control these things nearly as well as he can. Unless you're in the movie Iron Man 3, then everyone can do that all of a sudden. So they stay in retirement. They're like, screw that, I don't want any part of that. So he's like, whatever. He powers up his own suit a little bit too much, and then he heads to the battle alone. He fights a bit, and then right when he's about to be ended, the rest show up. Jan, Hank, and Rick are back. Nice. So Tony is done at this point. His armor is weak, he's close to being finished off, so he uses his remaining power to regenerate Hank's armor. So the Hulk snaps out of it and goes after Namor, while the rest of our heroes mourn over a fallen Tony Stark, who sacrificed himself to save his team. Similar vibes to Endgame. A lot of feels in that one, okay? A lot of feels. A good number 5 feels train. Number 4. What if Professor X had become the Juggernaut? In this reality, Professor X is the one who becomes Juggernaut and gets buried in the Temple of Sidorak. Now this caused him to go down a completely different path when it comes to the X-Men, because after this, well, he never created the X-Men, so now the Fantastic Four has to go against Magneto. So after Professor X Juggernaut head digs his way out, he discovers his telepathy was now much stronger with the added powers. What a treat. I mean, not really. He ends up taking over the country with his own X-Men X-Men posse to enforce these anti-human laws. Cyclops even sides with Magneto at this point because he's like, okay, at least this guy can block Xavier's telepathy. And it all comes down to this final confrontation with Cyclops and Xavier. They're battling it out on Asteroid M, and Cyclops is trying to remind Xavier about the vision, the original dream, with humans and mutants living together in perfect harmony. Doesn't that sound lovely? And then before he could really consider it, the ground beneath him exploded and he got launched into space forever. Oof!
Number 3, Galen. Galactus may be better known as a villain in the Marvel Universe, the main Marvel Universe, or at least a powerful antagonist if you will, but in the what if reality of Earth 92201, he's actually better known for being a sort of everyday hero, if you will. When Galen as Galactus ends up in battle against Thanos, who wields the Infinity Gauntlet, he ends up defeated, being transformed into an amnesiac human left on planet Earth. When found, it just so happens that Galen's voice and appearance greatly resembled that of a young Elvis. People believed he was Elvis returned, positing that Elvis never really died. Galen even ends up believing he is Elvis and finds happiness on Earth with a woman named Gertrude and her son Tony. Warlock finds Galen and offers to turn him back into his form of Galactus, but Galen is actually so happy he chooses to remain on Earth and continue living as Earth's Elvis replacement, basically. It's a great story.
Number 2, what if Spider-Man joined the Fantastic Four? Okay, with John Watts directing the newest Spider-Man trilogy for the MCU and the upcoming MCU Fantastic Four reboot, this next what if might not seem that impossible. The first ever issue of What If finds Pete with a number 5 on his chest. The Fantastic Five has a ring to it. I kind of love the idea already. So Pete was low on cash, so he figured, you know what, I'm gonna break into the Baxter building and straight up force an audition for Marvel's First Family. So Sue recruits Peter and the team is formidable. They're great, they're solid. They're so good that Sue doesn't even feel like there's a need for her on the team anymore. There's always something sad. Don't do it, Sue. She ends up choosing Namor as her other half, even joining him in his kingdom under the sea. Now she did love Reed as well, but her departure from the team just made it work better with a fishy guy. Now if you want to see more of that altered storyline, because it is quite intriguing, jump ahead 20 issues once you're done this epic kickoff. And finally, coming in at number 1, what if somebody else besides Spider-Man had been bitten by the radioactive spider? This is perhaps one of my favorite what ifs because I genuinely have thought about what would happen if I was Spider-Man. I work for Top 10 Nerd, of course I'm going to daydream about this. Thing is though, I'm afraid of heights, so it wouldn't exactly be smooth sailing. But I can dream, right? Even in the Marvel Universe, other big names can't handle the webs. In this what if, we see Flash Thompson, Betty Brant, and John Jameson each get a swing at the sticky life. So Flash gets bit and then he decides to take a crack at professional wrestling with the new muscles and all. Now he may have underestimated his strength because he kind of accidentally killed the guy. You should have tapped. Oops. Next up, Betty Brant gets bit, and I have to admit her costume is for sure the most stylish. Very good, makes for great Instagram posts, sure. But when she runs out of web fluid making TikToks, the thief who took Uncle Ben's life was easily able to get away. She was like... And finally we see John Jameson's turn, and he goes out like a hero. He tries to stop a space shuttle from crashing, and it's a lot harder than it looks. If you're not Pete, just don't even try, honestly.
Number 10, Shame of Thrones. Weird, but in a great way. Because for this story, we are heading over to the alternate reality belonging to the Little Marvels. Over in the Infinity comic Giant Size Little Marvels issue number 4, we get a glimpse into Dr. Von Doom's lair and his evil game night, which apparently happens every other Tuesday, according to Magneto. However, the whole issue consists of a tangent where the invited villains complain that Doom is the only one who gets to sit in a throne while they game, whereas they're all relegated, to normal seats. Doom argues it is because he's the most accomplished ruler among them all, and that he answers to no one. However, his mom has something to say about that. Vicky? Number 9. What if Sergeant Fury had fought World War II in outer space? I was literally going to just say that to introduce the story, but then of course it's already been said because that's the name of the story. In this comic, we get to see what it would be like if, in addition to the general opposition during World War II, there were also aliens involved, who wanted to, of course, invade Earth. As such, the Howling Commandos take to the stars to fight against German World War II soldiers in addition to alien invaders known as the Baytans. Did I also mention that Nick Fury is still smoking throughout this entire issue, even while he's wearing a space helmet? While some things would change in this scenario, it seems others would remain the same. How do you even smoke in a space helmet? That seems like it would be terrible. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more multiversal Marvel lists, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, The Final Showdown. Mutant X really had a whole series, but for the purpose of this list, we're just going to focus on one of its story arcs that takes place in the alternate reality of Earth 1298, as it was a 32-issue series, so I mean a lot happened. The basic idea here though is that instead of X Factor, we have a non-government or corporate mutant team known as the Six. Havoc in this reality ends up with Madeline Pryor, and the two of them have a child together named Scott. Yeah, it's a little different than 616. Here Maddie does become the Goblin Queen, but like how we have the Phoenix Force, she becomes infected with the Goblin Force and its influence, turning her dark. Initially, Maddie is actually known by her hero mantle, Marvel Woman. As such, Havoc and their son Scotty must fight against the Goblin Queen. After a long build-up where no one is able to stop Madeline, it's revealed that Scotty is able to due to his insane level of power. He rids his mom of the Goblin influence, but also banishes her in the process. Don't worry though, just like in main continuity, Maddie would return here as well. I believe she gets banished to like the center of the earth. It's a weird place, but it's a pretty good place, I would say. Mutant X, should you read it? Nah, I think you should read it. I think you could read it. I don't know if you should, but you definitely could. Number 7, What If the X-Men Had Lost Inferno? I love this comic, mainly for the panel at the end where Alicia Masters' Storm whispers to her newborn babe, "I love you, baby." I think it might be one of my all-time favorite panels ever, actually. But there is lots of weird stuff to love from this issue, including the fact that Doctor Strange and Rachel Summers also randomly deliver this baby at the end. In this What If, we imagine what would have gone down if the Goblin Queen hadn't been defeated and instead was victorious. One of the things that would have come about? Her unleashing the beast within Wolverine and turning him into a villain who devours babies. Also, Rachel becomes trapped and later freed from being a bridal mannequin? I think that's a thing that happens here. That's definitely looks like what's happening. Also, I love Rachel as a bridal mannequin. And how after she's like, "Thanks, my face hurt, too much smiling." Oh, by the way, Doctor Strange, who frees Rachel, he also gets to wear a cool eye patch in this world. Why? Because he's Doctor Strange. He gets an eye patch. I like it. Everyone should have eye patches. I want an alternate reality where everyone has an eye patch. Number 6, Ghost Racers. This is a series that comes from the Battleworld pocket dimension that was governed by God Emperor Doom. Just like we had the Thor Corps, here we have the Ghost Racers, which is basically like its own category of racing, creating an organization or like even a company out of that set form, like NASCAR. The Ghost Racers are made up of various ghost riders who of course race one another for Battleworld's entertainment. And of course, so wealthy fans can ideally make some funds on the wins and losses of each race. Although all the riders are pitted against one another, and eventually Arcade, who is in charge of them, sends them to take down Robbie Reyes, the current racing champion, eventually they all remember what things were like before Battleworld, and they decide to rise up against those that are controlling them. Which I love. Also, I just love the idea of like just a group of racers that are just all ghost riders, and they're like, we race each other for fun. This is what we do now. Ghost Racers. Number 5, What If Wolverine Battled Conan the Barbarian? In issue number 16 of the second volume of What If, we get to see what would happen if Wolverine somehow came to the time and lands of Conan and the duo ended up fighting one another. That's basically what ifs are for, right? Just seeing people that would not normally fight, and who will win. In order to revive his love, Conan is asked to bring another soul in her place to sacrifice. The soul that he decides to bring is actually Red Sonja, so that's not great because Wolverine, having fought with Red Sonja previously, had basically kind of fallen for her, and he does not agree with what is going on because of his own sentiment. He wants to rescue Sonja, probably because she reminds him of Jean Grey. Honestly, it's pretty weird to me that no one has ever said that like Jean Grey and Mary Jane Watson look similar, considering people have both thought that they looked like Red Sonja in the comics. So do all women with red hair just look the same? Is that the implication here? Or do all three of these women actually closely resemble one another, but we never really acknowledge that like Jean and MJ like look very similar, like weirdly similar? And Red Sonja's in there too. It's like the trifecta of like redheads. In the end, Wolverine takes Conan's hand in a fight that the two have, and the two end up permanently swapping places, with Conan returning to Wolverine's home reality and Wolverine staying in Conan's age. Wolverine finds a happy ending with Sonja. Conan, not so much. He like sees Jean, and then she goes full Dark Phoenix, and then that's the end of that. Number 4. Age of Ultron vs. Marvel Zombies. Another even more bizarre story coming at us from God Emperor Doom's Battle World. This comic was all about the world that existed outside, actually, of Doom's Battle World, known as the Deadlands. And if you didn't like living by Doom's rules, well, you certainly wouldn't like this. But this might be where you would end up. Defy Doom, and this could be a place that he put you. Age of Ultron vs. Marvel Zombies explored these Deadlands that were watched over by Annihilus' insect creatures. And yeah, it's about as wild as it sounds. Around every corner, with the flip of every page, awaits more gore, folks losing their heads, and monsters, monsters, monsters! I think in a world of zombies versus robots, no one really wins. Is that the takeaway here? Also, because this is Battle World, there are lots of appearances of random multiversal characters, such as young Hank Pym, who's kinda like the main character of this, from the past alternate Earth of 51920, and the Pilgrim Punisher of Earth 15513. At least he looks like a Pilgrim Punisher. I like that he still has his skull shirt though. So he's like got the hat, he's got the coat, and he's like still got this like very 80s style looking logo and shirt.
Number 3. Nate Gray. For a guy named X-Man, he's gotta be a powerful character. And he is. Nate Gray comes from the Age of Apocalypse timeline. He was created by Mr. Sinister using the DNA of both Scott Summers, Cyclops, and Jean Grey. There are a few characters who are a child of these two mutants, namely, there's Cable. Now Cable has huge psionic abilities, but because of being infected by the techno-organic virus, almost all of his energy goes towards keeping himself alive. Nate Gray is basically Cable, but without that limitation. When he first came into the 616 reality, he was able to hide himself from Cerebro, which is supposed to be impossible. He is described as being on the same level of Jean Grey harnessing the Phoenix Force, which is one of the greatest threats the X-Men and the world has ever faced, and he is described as an Omega level living god. He can read the minds of others, he can sense the emotions and histories left on objects, he can detect rifts in space and time, he can move into the astral plane where he can see the future, and after he had a bit of practice, he could even increase the power of other mutants. He has cured cancer, destroyed cities on the other side of the Earth during a nightmare, manipulated matter to a cosmic scale, and traveled through space and time. He is basically Mutant Jesus. Look at him.
Number 2. Strange Supreme. Strange Supreme is the Dark Doctor Stephen Strange we see as is showcased in the Disney Plus What If streaming series in the season 1 episode, What If Doctor Strange Lost His Heart Instead of His Hands? In this episode, Strange becomes obsessed with getting back Christine Palmer after losing her in a car accident instead of, losing his hands, because Christine was his heart. Get it? Because her death is considered an absolute point in time, the spirit of the Ancient One returns to Strange to remind him that he cannot do anything to bring her back. Strange doesn't like that answer and is like, I'm still gonna do stuff, so he gets split in twain, with one half of him choosing to do whatever it takes to get Christine back, because the Ancient One's like, I'm not gonna let that happen, just cut you in half. This prompts him to turn to the dark arts, absorbing various creatures and monsters from the universe in order to get as much power as is needed to reverse Christine's death. In the end, this Strange of the multiverse becomes more monster than man, defeating his other half by reabsorbing him and breaking the universe to bits when he disregards all warnings and brings Christine back to life anyways once more. Doesn't even work out well because Christine's like, dude, you're like super evil, I'm like not here for this. Number 1. Marvel. Even saying the title sounds just like an experience. I don't even know where to start with Marvel because this continuity feels so just like non-existent here. There's no through line. The story is meant to be about Kal-AOL, a play on Kal-El, a kid from the future who is sent back in time to save the world and to save himself. In the future, you see the world is about to end. Fortunately though, that doesn't happen. While Al doesn't have any powers, he somehow is moderately successful as a hero. After the world doesn't end, his parents send the time machine they originally sent him through back in time to pick him up. But Al decided to travel back in time to the beginning instead. There he meets maybe God, and also learns that Wolverine evolved from an otter and dinosaurs can talk. With every issue in this story, you ask yourself, how can it get any weirder? And then it somehow does that. Also, what's up with these covers? They are almost completely unrelated to the plot of the comics. I guess sexy ladies sell comics, and so who needs a plot was the thought process with Marvel. At least with the covers. And maybe with the inside of it as well, because I don't really know what the plot is about.
Kicking off the list with number 10, What If? The Juggernaut. Okay, to start this sad list, we got What If starring the Juggernaut. It was released in 1997, written by George Gonzalez, and we kick off in a world where Sentinels have already wiped out all superheroes. Great start. Plus there's this toxic gas that's filling up the atmosphere, which will kill all of life. So things are beginning grim right off the bat, okay. And all that's left now at this point is just the Juggernaut. Now he's hunting down these Sentinels. He wants to die, but his own invulnerability won't let that happen. Kind of like Hulk the End, just a sad, strong man in a world full of rubble. So he sees Iron Man's helmet, he sees Cyclops' cracked visor. He's just walking down horrible memory lane. Then he meets a couple of surviving mutants and they're not in good condition, mentally. I mean, they're actually blaming Juggernaut for killing the X-Men. And it all ends with Juggernaut knowing he's going to be the last living being on the planet and that it's his own damn fault. And before we go on to number 9 for our next sad what if story, if you guys could go ahead and please like this video, or else we'll be on a what if you didn't like the video, and then it's gonna be a sad video on all the alternate futures where you didn't like our videos. So please go ahead and do that, because that would be great. You guys are the best, thank you so much. Now back to the list. Number 9, what if Cable had destroyed the X-Men? Well, this one just sounds bad right off the hop. So after Professor X came back to Earth, the team was never going to be the same again. At this X-Men meeting, Xavier gets in a fight with Cable, and then all of a sudden it turns into Cable and his crew versus everybody, and it was just this big brawl. Now they escape, but later on, Cable kills Xavier, Jean, and Scott with a siren bomb. So now everybody's deciding on what to do with this guy. Wolverine's team wanted to kill him, and Storm's team wanted to bring him in. Both are pretty bad. So the Avengers have to step in and fight their battles while they're all working their own stuff out over there. So the Avengers are like, just do your thing, we're gonna go fight your bad guys, just wrap it up. But eventually Cable and his team is killed by Wolverine's team. Number 8, what if Wolverine battled Conan the Barbarian? Written by Glenn Herdling and released in 1990, what if Wolverine had battled Conan the Barbarian? So basically Conan and Wolverine switched dimensions. So we have Wolverine causing trouble in the Hyborian Age alongside Red Sonja, and Conan smashes Cyclops in the head with a rock, which causes the full fury of the Phoenix Force to be unleashed. So now this has caused a ripple effect, so the psychic rapport was shattered, and without Wolverine to hurl Colossus at her, there's nothing that prevents Jean Grey from transforming into her dark persona before she can destroy herself, resulting in the destruction of the entire universe. So just like that, Cyclops gets hit with a rock and then it all goes to shit. So yeah, crossovers are for sure fun, but you gotta look at the possible ways it could go poorly as well. Wolverine versus Conan the Barbarian is definitely one of those ways. Number 7, what if the Punisher was a hall monitor? Dipping into a more comedic side of things, because the last two were just straight tragic, the Punisher as a hall monitor. Short and sweet, and it couldn't get any better. He's watching the halls in a quiet, generic grade school in a typical town in USA. You can find this in volume 2, issue 34. It's pretty intense. I mean, it goes for the comedic take, but Frank Castle being Frank Castle in front of any children? That's a nightmare. They thought they were off the hook at the beginning of the issue. The kids reiterate the fact that the Hulk is no longer watching these halls, so they're fine. So once the Punisher sends them to the principal's office after getting caught, the last panel we see is the Hulk in the principal's chair now. It's a short one, but the idea is actually terrifying and hilarious all at the same time. Poor kids. I thought my principal was scary. I thought Mr. Hubert was scary. No, the Hulk is a bit more scary. A bit, just a little bit. Number 6, what if the Hulk died and Kyra lived? Written by Greg Pak, released in 2007. Okay, so we start with the Hulk saving Kyra by throwing her out of the way of the explosion instead of the ship. So now the Hulk had died along with Crown City. And Kyra, she's pretty pissed, right? She takes all the old power from the planet and gets ready with her sights set on Earth. She's coming. First stop, of course, being the moon, where she defeats Black Bolt and then implants a obedience disc on him. So when Strange and Sentry come to the rescue, she makes Black Bolt use his sonic scream, which of course results in both of them dying. She's killing everybody fast, okay? So Heroine comes to stop her and says that basically if you kill everybody on Earth, nobody can honor your dead husband. So she says, fine, but you're gonna wish you were dead instead. And then it cuts to 21 years later, and she's made all the remaining heroes build this massive Hulk statue. And when it's finally done, she walks onto the hand of the statue and then turns it to stone, joining him. The end. Yeah, how sad is that? I mean, I feel like it wouldn't take those guys 21 years to build a statue. I mean, if they're getting paid by the hour, sure, then by all means, go for it.
Number 5, actual Black Widow. Black Widow in issue 34 of What If gets her own little mini comic taking up a third of a page. It's really kind of like just a panel. It answers the question, what if Spider-Man had married the Black Widow? Well, it wouldn't end well apparently. The joke is based on what Black Widows are known to do to their mates in nature. Female Black Widows, that is. In nature, they eat their mates, hence why in this comic, Spider-Man doesn't fare too well. The implication is that Black Widow actually eats Peter here. We see her picking her teeth, looking quite content and burping, while behind her Spider-Man's suit looks pretty deflated with bones poking out of it and littered around it. So, yeah.
Number 4, what if somebody else besides Spider-Man had been bitten by the radioactive spider? Written by Don Glut, released in 1977, we get to see a dream play out. Look, we've all probably wanted to be Spider-Man at one point or another. Of course, I mean, doing backflips and swinging downtown, that's gotta be the vibe. But of course, when it comes to stopping criminals and taking out supervillains, it's probably pretty stressful. So in this What If, we get to see this idea play out. We see other characters have a crack at the life of the web slinger, starting with Flash Thompson. And let's just say it's a lot harder than it looks. So we got Flash Thompson. Now after he gets bit, he teaches a bad driver a lesson, and he feels pretty good with his new given abilities, and he plays it out a bit. So he decides to take a crack at professional wrestling, maybe make some cash, which is a pretty good idea. I mean, you're a superhero, so you can definitely win most, if not all, fights. But he accidentally kills the guy. Sorry, oops. Then Betty Brant is now up with the powers. Okay, so let's see how she would do in the life. Well, her costume for starters is pretty badass. But when she runs out of web fluid while making TikToks, a thief runs by and gets away. And that thief, of course, being the one to take Uncle Ben's life. So far, so bad. Now finally, we have our third contender with the powers. John Jameson. While his outfit was also pretty good, he couldn't do the job like Peter, and he actually died while trying to prevent a space shuttle from crashing. I guess it's not as easy as it looks. I mean, to be fair, if something actually happened and I had webs, I really wouldn't know what to do. I would do a backflip and be like, is it fixed? No? It was cool though. Number 3, what if Loki had found the hammer of Thor? The final issue of volume 1 of What If, again, something we're kind of close to seeing in the MCU, especially with Loki season 2 being confirmed. These timelines are about to be really enjoyable, and we might get a hint of this, I think. So Donald Blake ends up not finding the hammer because Loki tossed it into the woods, and then the Saturnians wiped out Donald. So Thor wakes up in the land of the dead, memory not included. This is all bad for Thor. It's not so much Loki using the hammer, he just alters the hammer's location, and then Thor's altered future is now a stressful one. Number 2, what if Kraven the Hunter had killed Spider-Man? Released in 1990, written by Richard Howell. Yeah, judging by this title alone, this one's a little sad. I figured we're already on the Spider-Man misfortune train, so I had to throw this one in next, you know? What if Kraven had killed Spider-Man? Okay, so we start with Pete patrolling the streets when he's suddenly trapped by Kraven in a net, and just like that, he unloads, killing Peter Parker. And of course, he eats a bunch of spiders and suits up himself to celebrate. Yeah, you eat a bunch of spiders, now you're Spider-Man. That's how it works. I think a human eats like, what, 7 spiders in a year when they're sleeping? So we have like, what, 7,000 to go? So now he's Spider-Man, just like that, cool. Meanwhile, MJ is like, where on earth is that Peter Parker guy? And then MJ is approached by a couple of thugs, and then in comes Spider-Man to save her. Only it's Kraven, but she doesn't know that. But she can tell something's up because Spider-Man doesn't recognize her, and he's way more brutal with taking out these thugs. So Cap, Daredevil, and Human Torch jump in to see what's up with the wall crawler. They did a decent job of wearing down the beast, but he needed more power. He ate a bunch of spiders earlier, so now it's only fair if he tries to eat Spider-Man's dead body, right? Comics are weird. So MJ tells Cap and the gang that Spider-Man is actually Peter Parker, and that the Spider-Man is indeed not the same. And then Aunt May goes into denial hearing about the news. She's messed up now for life. And the media isn't happy with the tension between supers and the public. The story ends with MJ standing at Peter's funeral, wondering how things could have been. God, Peter just can't catch a break, eh? Oh my God. And finally, number 1, the saddest of them all, what if Wolverine father? Written by Rob Williams, released in 2011, we start off with Wolverine taking out the Winter Soldier. And we see a world with Wolverine and Daken if they had spent their life growing together as father and son. So now we get to see what it would have been like if Logan was there for them the whole time. Now in this reality, they're named John. This life, however, was filled with repression and lies and led to John leaving his home and rising up as Daken, becoming the leader of the Japanese underworld. So Wolverine tried to save him, but because of the way he was raised with this version of Logan, he looked at him like a monster. He viewed himself as a monster too. "This is the Muramasa blade, John," says Logan as he stabs him. "Healing factors don't work on it." The issue ends with the boy dying beside his father, and Logan uses the same blade on himself. And that's the end. That's the end of the comic. Everyone dies, everyone's sad. That's what ifs for you, right there.